and liberating the ancestors that lived within, and which contributed to my, and obviously all of us, our own particular strands of creativity, expression, desire for expression, understanding, knowledge. And the lovely thing about as with the Ammonite, it's all there. It's all cast down, it's all laid, just waiting to be uncovered with fear and trepidation at times, and put to good use, which I'm sure this is what we're all doing, which gives us the cry for expression, etc., etc. So I hope you found that little tale interesting, and Shanae, as they say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Sorry, I was a bit distracted by being live on Facebook. Oh, okay. Where are we? We are in gallery view again. Nick, thank you very much for your fossils and for your crafty craft stories. Can I ask Anita Howard to unmute herself and to tell us her story? Welcome, Anita. All the way from? Where are you at the moment?
Passage West.
Okay, all the way from
Cork.
Passage.
Sunlight is the most enduring memory of my first trip to London. It was glorious and intense on the battlement walk of the Tower of London, as my father held me up to look over the River Thames. I was 4 years old and aware of very little beyond the unusually hot weather. In later years, I would enjoy the story of the hasty exit we had just made from the armoury in the White Tower, where my older cousin had drawn the gaze of everyone within earshot by looking up at Henry VIII's generously proportioned battle armour and remarking in carrying tones, "Wow, he sure had big." As we laughed together, the lives of other families were being torn apart in the country I had left only days earlier. The Queen of England's cousin, Lord Louis Mountbatten, regularly spent the summer at Mullaghmore Bay in County Sligo. That morning, in the same blazing sunshine that we were enjoying, he had taken his family out on a fishing trip. When they were well out to sea, the IRA bomb concealed on their boat the night before was detonated. The explosion killed Mountbatten, his daughter's elderly mother-in-law, and 2 children. This assassination and the later Warren Point ambush made the day, the 27th of August, 1979, the deadliest of the Troubles up until then. The news had begun to filter through on the car radio as we drove down from our home in Liverpool to visit my uncle and aunt in Surrey. It was being discussed all around us with disbelief and growing anger as we made our way through the Tower of London, which is, after all, not only a tourist attraction, but a working British military base. Our hurried exit from the White Tower was not really prompted by my cousin's outspokenness, but my parents' fear that their Irish accents would be detected by those around them. It was their first experience of that fear in 2 decades of life in England. In the years that followed, I would come to understand that fear myself. Most second-generation Irish children do not retain their parents' accent, but I, inevitably, was to be one of the exceptions. This was largely ignored during my years at primary school. In secondary school, it was noticed at last. Year after bloody year, the Troubles had continued. My classmates and I were increasingly aware that there was a political edge to being Irish in Britain. On British television, those suspected of connections with Republican terrorism had their voices dubbed by actors when they were interviewed, as a feature of Margaret Thatcher's policy of ensuring that they would be outlawed. Perhaps this, among other things, sent its own message about the power and implication of an Irish voice, especially when it was heard in the wrong place. And an English school at that time could count as the wrong place under certain unsupervised conditions. The playground taunt of there might have been a hint of affection in the playground chant of "Anita is an IRA spy," mainly because it was applied to such an unlikely subject. I must have been the least rebellious child the school was housing at that time, and subversion did not come naturally to me. But not every child was able to stop at teasing. Insults like "Halaya Naisha, you wee Irish hooah," and "you wee Irish bitch" would be thrown at me, the "we" coming directly from the manner of speech associated with Northern Ireland, where the aggressors were sure that my terrorist connections must lie. On several occasions, the bullying turned physical, with threats of much worse, simply because of the way I spoke. The assailants were usually that singular type of boy who seems moved to work out his own concept of national pride on the quietest girl within range of his fists. I had never expressed any sympathy for the IRA, but that was beside the point. It was enough for my classmates that I sounded Irish and was making no obvious attempt to sound anything much like them. If I wasn't one of them, I must, of necessity, be one of them. The idea that I might simply be my own person seemed to be more threatening than anything else. Every interaction carries a lesson, but we interpret these lessons for ourselves. These encounters didn't teach me that it would be a good idea to change my accent. Instead, they left me certain that I would never fit into the world around me, and even open to the dangerous idea that it would be best not to try. Inevitably, the young patriots of the schoolyard went too far. Things could no longer be hidden, and my mother intervened. The worst offenders were warned off by the school authorities with a severity that was never forgotten. In return, I was further isolated and got through each day by speaking as little as possible, outside my own mind, where, of course, conditions were always perfect and defences could never be breached, because I had forged every last one of them. Years later, a blazing summer again darkens around us. I've long since left England to make my home in Cork, but I have become a regular visitor to the Tower when I return to London. I know every inch of that place that is open to visitors. The towers, the flightless ravens, the ghosts, the long list of incarcerated Howards, who were usually so good at cutting off their noses to spite their faces that the eventual removal of their heads came as a surprise to no one but themselves. And, of course, that old favourite, Henry VIII's battle armour. Like all the patriots in my life, there is no doubt that he certainly had big ideas. But then, haven't we all? For now that health and travel restrictions keep me from making yet another return to those ancient walls of blood, despair, and betrayal, I can see even more clearly than ever that they're only a pale reflection of the rarefied walls we each create in our mind. Walls built, like their physical counterparts, not to charm small children, but to safeguard our beliefs about who we are, or want to be, to attack and even destroy those who trespass on our chosen world and challenge such beliefs. And then I think of others who managed to live their lives beyond the schoolyard and its fortresses. My uncle, a proud Englishman, who was stunned by the Mountbatten assassination, but welcomed us with open arms on that sunlit day, and without a word about events on the news, set about making our trip to London the wonderful experience that it was. The principal of my secondary school, who noticed me standing alone day after day, quietly asked other children why it was that they were allowing that to happen, and sent them up to me, whatever their protestations, to ask if I was all right. And near to the end of my time in the school, the tough-looking girl who swept up to me one day and told me, with absolute sincerity, that she loved to hear me speak, because I sounded exactly like her nan. Ancestral walls. We move with them or against them. Moving beyond them can be another question. And when a clear blue sky can so swiftly give way to trauma, bloodshed, and division, perhaps the reality is that there are walls we can never escape. But maybe it's only now that I am beginning to learn what was there for me on the battlements on that day in 1979. When our walls are around us, we can let them close us into our own darkness, or else we can allow them to carry us up towards the clear light of day, and whatever on earth that light has to teach us. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Anita. This was a really poignant and uplifting story, as well as, yeah, it's the human condition is a bit sad, but it's also quite beautiful. Thank you. Rob, would you be able to talk to us and tell us your story? Are you here? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So this story is called Save the Last Dance for Me, and it's kind of a tribute to my grandmothers, my paternal and maternal grandmothers, who inspired me to cook and to, I think, be quite a good baker, and saved me from the perils. Sorry, Nick, saved me from the perils of woodwork and metalwork and pottery at school, because I was good at none of them, but found a home in home economics. And this is mixed with some memories I have about attending a family wedding in the south coast of England many years ago, when I was much younger than I am now. And this story is probably a heady mix of the real, the vaguely remembered, and possibly the surreal, but also maybe the made up as well. Last night, I had the strangest dream of a past imperfect, where there were simpler times, where supermarket pizzas had very thick bases, and they only came in one flavorless cheese and tomato goo variety. In this dream, I can hear the beat of music, and I can hear words, profound words, which are pregnant with emotion as they drift beyond the walls of a so-called grand ballroom into the reception area, into the paneled reception area, and on to the ladies and gents restrooms. And the words of this music, of this song, go D-I-S-C-O. D-I-S-C-O. C-O. As you can see, very profound. Singing D, desirable. Singing S, I, irresistible. Singing S, super sexy. Singing C, such a cutie. And singing O, O, O. And in this story, or this dream that I tell myself, I'm about 11 years old and I'm shuffling self-consciously back from the restroom, still hiccuping after over hastily consuming a glass of cola. And I'm less than quietly attired in light blue baggy trousers with large side pockets, a shirt covered in swirly patterns, and a red and black and green V-neck sleeveless jumper, known as a tank top, topped off with an out-of-control afro that announces my arrival before I actually set foot in the room. It's 1980, and I'm at a family wedding in the faded splendor of the Decousha Hotel, a seafront hotel in Hayling Island on the south coast of England. I don't recall the names of the bride and groom, nor why we stayed in a hotel that particular time, which was such a luxury for us. Having been told to use your manners, don't get your clothes dirty, say hello to Auntie Joan and Uncle Roger, don't slouch, and don't pile your plate too high. I'm feeling too old to run around and play with the other kids, and too shy to attempt to go near the dance floor. I'm sitting alone. And then for the next minute in this dream, for some reason, I'm at this wedding, I'm seated between my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother was known as Ivy, aka the Duchess, and my paternal grandmother was known as Geraldine, aka Gwen. The Duchess, who in her younger days was a maid in service to landed gentry, the landed gentry had a stately pile in Hampshire, as well as a townhouse in Knightsbridge. The Duchess told me that one day she actually passed by Gandhi. This was in London in 1931. She was always impressed by what wealth and education could achieve. And the Duchess liked going out to dinner, Pekingese dogs, Ferrero Rocher, and she showed her loves through baking these amazing strawberry sponges with Victoria sponges with cream and fresh strawberries. Gwen, Geraldine, aka Gwen, my paternal grandmother, who was one of 14 and worked for a number of years packing chocolates in Cadbury's Bournville, was also impressed by what lucky numbers could achieve. She liked going to bingo, smoking Park Drive cigarettes, herbal cough sweets, and she showed her love by baking these amazing rock cakes. And also, this was followed by jelly and ice cream. The Duchess at this table with me in between is giving forth on the wonders of packaged holidays to exclusive resorts and exotic places like Malta, to a captive or perhaps captured group of relatives, including myself. And Geraldine, or Gwen, is updating her, the Duchess, on the latest news from relatives in Edmonton, Canada, where a lot of our relatives had moved to over the years. And then she produced this in the dream, she produces this Canadian silver dollar. And I, for some reason, flip the coin. And as it lands, as it moves towards the ground, it skims across the top of it's a silver salt cellar. Sparks fly, and I'm instantly transformed. And while I am now in my white disco suit, I strut out onto the dance floor and perform a compilation of moves, which I can only describe as a cross between John Travolta, Michael Flatley, and Michael Jackson. The next day, there's a massive round of applause. And the next day at breakfast, in recognition of how a febrile imagination can overcome a lack of talent in the dancing department, the Dilkusha management award me first choice of the Kellogg's cereal variety pack at breakfast, which to me in the early 80s was just an amazing experience, learning of breakfast cereal beyond Kellogg's cornflakes. And what goes around comes around. Just as I awake from my dream, I can hear the beat of the music and the words pregnant with profound emotions. Welcome to the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob, for this fascinating insights into a time so long ago, before Corona. That's amazing, isn't it? Can I ask Rae McKinlay, where is she? Yes, she's. Rae, are you here? Okay. Rae. Yeah, I found her. Rae, please take the floor all the way from Skibbereen or Ballydehob. Rae McKinlay.
I'm in Ballydehob tonight, and tonight I've cracked my first Glasgow story. Would you believe? So I'm going to be Glaswegian tonight, if I can remember how to do that. Okay.
Oh, is she gone?
Rae, we can't hear you, hon. Unmute yourself.
I'll mute her. Wait a minute. Where is she?
Okay.
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 Rae. How can she be muted?
Sorry, my darling, you muted yourself again.
Right, my hands are up here. I'm not muting myself, honest. Okay, we'll start again. Right. Mutton on the bone. A handful of lentils, scrumptious carrots, and juicy leeks bubbled together on the stove. Margaret placed the lid on the smoke-stained pot. And as she did so, her mind wandered back to the mountains, which formed the spine in her homeland. It was as though the mountains were once mythical beasts that lay down and forgot to rise. She sensed the wind swirl in her long ebony hair and imagined her feet, free of shoes, sink into the mossy ground. But her meandering thoughts were broken by the lilt of her mother. Aye, picturesque it may be, but this is a land which is tortured and cursed by the exile and the hungry. Here in Glasgow, the wind blew black. The sound of the city tormented her ears, and the thick, dense smoke choked the smile of her face. Oh, how she wished she was in Donegal. She picked up the pot and swift of foot ran to Jessie Gallagher's house. She pushed open the door and placed the hot pot of soup on the table. She was aware of the 4 set of hollow, wide eyes peering from the cubbyhole bed, and the bairn asleep in the bottom drawer. Margaret whispered, "Any news yet, Jessie?" Jessie shook her head. No, he's still missing in action. It would be the same old day, hard at work in Mrs. Baxter's dairy. Margaret looked at her hands, red raw from scrubbing and scouring. The November chill stung. The sores in the crags of her palms, and the pea soup smog settled on her hair and eyebrows as she walked through Elder Park. She glanced at the trees and felt sorry for them, for she noted their drooping and limped posture. She returned home to her single end that evening around 7 o'clock. She found her ointment of tree resin and smothered it on her hands. It offered some relief. She sat down to a bowl of hot soup, a slice of crusty bread, and a morsel of Galloway cheese. She ate very slowly. And then she tidied herself up and she went out to the Pearce Institute. An open, crackling fire greeted her. The warmth soothed her weary body. At the head, on the top table, sat Mary Barber, a formidable woman. She had the sweetest smile, despite the fact that she was the leader in the resistance of the Glasgow rent strikes. She jumped up and she declared, "God help any sheriff officer who dares to evict any one of us from our homes. The landlords should be ashamed of themselves, hiking the prices of our rents when our men are languishing in trenches." It was at that very moment that Margaret knew that she would join Mary Barber's army. The shades of evening were descending as she left the Pearce Institute. On her way home, she skipped and her heart bounced with vision, meaning, and purpose. Then, from the shadow, a heavy, greasy hand grabbed her from the back of her hair and pulled her into a doorway. Margaret's nostrils picked up the odour of fusty sweat and stale tobacco. She tried to turn her head, and from the corner of her eye, she saw the narrow slit eyes and the grey wizened face of her landlord. So you've been at a meeting, Hen, have you? I just found out you've been doing business in my house, haven't you? You're a spay wifey. Well, Margaret's body trembled, but she surprised herself by managing to say these words. I'm no spay wifey. Spay wifeys read the tea leaves, the bones and shells. I'm a healer. I use God's resources and I don't charge for that. Well, the landlord just laughed. Heal away, Hen, if you want. But I tell you this, I'll be up to collect my rent on Friday. And since you're doing business, I'm going to raise it threepence. Well, scarlet rage consumed her. And she managed to get a hairpin from her hair and she stabbed the back of her landlord's hand. And to her astonishment, she mustered the strength to square her shoulders, and with one mighty puff, she spat on his face, fully forcible. Well, she darted along Govan Road. She could feel the saliva thicken in her throat and her heart pounded. A haze covered her eyes and the sound of the night echoed loudly. But alas, she ran upstairs to her house and she fetched her suitcase from beneath the bed and she threw in her clothes and got her savings from the tea caddy. She thanked God that the landlord was nowhere to be seen. But now she had the mind and the awareness of one who was hunted. She slowly navigated the narrow alleyways and the jiggers. And from the corner of her eye, she saw this woman appear, covered in a black shawl. She handed Margaret a slip of paper. Now, Margaret was not really a woman of learning, but she did have basic literacy, and she opened the sheet of paper and it read, "Textile workers wanted in Twecker." Alone, she took the long journey northwards to Twecker. And that's where the story ends, but also begins in another chapter.
Fantastic, Rae. What a job.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rae. Great. All the way from Glasgow, sound and view.
Yeah, definitely Celtic. So
okay. Can I invite Clair Lalor to unmute herself and tell us her ancestral tale? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Moze. Yeah, just listening to everybody's stories, I'm very impressed, and I haven't prepared something as thoughtfully as you all have. But when Moze asked me to, or told me about this organization, and I thought I would love to share something of my history, really. So I'll just talk, and I hope that that'll be okay. I grew up in America, in the United States, in the southern state of Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, actually. And most people know that only for its racial tensions, which I grew up with because I was born in 47, the end of 47. So all the time of the 50s and the bus boycotts and Martin Luther King and the race riots, they were very much a part of my growing up. But because my parents were not from the South, my connection with the South was always a little detached, I have to say. My grandparents, my mother's parents came from Rhodes, the Isle of Rhodes, which is an island off Turkey. It's a Greek island at the moment, but it used to be Turkish, it used to be Italian, it's been Greek and Greek. So it's had many different cultures that have ruled the island. But I am Jewish, and my grandparents would have come, or the Jewish community which was there originated in Spain. They came from the Spanish Inquisition was in like 1492, around that time, and the Jews were expelled from Spain, and the Turkish Empire at that point welcomed the Jewish people. So a lot of Jews of this Spanish era, the Jews had been in Spain for hundreds of years before that. They moved to that part of the world and to North Africa. They had always been in the Middle East, but they came back to the Middle East and then to this part of the world, Greek, Turkey, Italy. A lot of the Jews there are what are called Sephardic Jews, and that they still maintain a language which is partly Spanish and partly Hebrew. It's a mixture of the two. So it's called Ladino, and my grandparents would have spoke that language. My mother grew up with that in her home. And I'd like to sing you a song in Ladino, if I can. Okay. Scalerica de oro e de marfin, porque suva la novia ad archidushin. Venimos a ver, y gozan y logran y tengan mucho bien. Venimos a ver, y gozan y logran y tengan mucho bien. La novia no tiene dinero, la novia no tiene dinero, que mos tengan un mazal bueno, que mos tengan un mazal alto. Venimos a ver, y gozan y logran y tengan mucho bien. Venimos a ver, y gozan y logran y tengan mucho bien. So it was, we're talking about ancestry and I've lived in Ireland now for 46 years, and still my home is in that community. And I just find it very strange. There's something very strange about that, how and maybe it isn't true for everyone, but that sense of home and community and of people just being friendly, feeling safe in their friendships with their family and with the community. I mean, into Montgomery not only came my grandparents, but a whole huge numbers of people from Rhodes left Ireland, left Rhodes around the time just before the First World War and after the First World War. So my grandmother would have had her childhood friends with her there. You know, and the culture was still very strong. And my grandmother lived in America for over 50 years, but she would speak to us, the grandchildren, in English, but it began in English and it tended to end in Ladino. So you get to know this, you learn this wonderful capacity to know what someone's saying, even though you haven't a clue of what the words mean, which I'm sure many of you very much understand that, I'm sure. And there's something about that which I reckon, having lived in Ireland so long, it is something that I recognized of the Irish, that there is that same feeling, from my perception as an outsider, that is still very strong here, that the family and community are real in a very personal way that certainly isn't necessarily true in America. And in some of the other countries I've traveled in, I wouldn't think it's the same. So I just recognize the support that has given me in my own life. You know, it's to know where I came from, to know the kind of people that they were, you know, to make that journey, to live in another country. And to know that over the years, when they were tested, family counted in the end. And even people in the community that would have done things that I didn't like and I didn't think were even honest, there was still something that said, okay, but you still belong here, even though there wasn't approval of the behavior. It's something I can't really justify in myself and not even really completely understand. But I recognize that that's to do with the bond of a family. Yeah. So, my father's family, my father's family were actually from Romania, and they came to England, to London, around the same time, the end of around 1900 or 1920, something around there, just before the First World War. So I didn't know my father's family until I came to England after I left university. I didn't know them very well. So just to say that it's I think that one of the reasons this bond with my mother's family is so strong is because my father wasn't a part of that. So I think the desire to really belong is, again, it's a bit of a mystery where we really do belong. Even though we have even though I have strong attachments and love and connection, there's still something about belonging. So, I will tell you a funny story. My grandfather, his family were from Rhodes, but like the relationship between England and Ireland, Rhodes is not that far from Lebanon in Turkey. So they went to Tripoli, and my grandfather would have gone with his wife and children there to make a better living, really, to earn, so my grandfather and his brothers, who I knew all of them because they all came to Montgomery, they grew up in Lebanon and in Beirut and in another city called Beirut. So there was a family crisis in that my grandfather had a small cigarette factory, actually, where they used to roll the cigarettes by hand, which was quite an art, I think, in those days. And what happened was that his factory burned down. So by this time, all of his children were all going to America. America was the land of promise. America was the place that they could make a living. So they had all gone to America. So my great-grandfather, his name was Isaac, he said to his wife, "Do you know, I think I'll go and visit them over there in America. But I'm not going to tell them I'm coming. Because if they thought I'd come, if they thought I would come, they'd tell me not to come." So his wife looked at him and he said, "You know, if you're going to go to America just for a visit, let's just go." So that's what they did. They packed up all their belongings, they sold everything, and they just went to America. They turned up, they arrived in America, not telling any of their children that they were actually coming. So they arrived in America, and well, unfortunately, he died a few years later, but my great-grandmother, I knew her. She was like 104 or something when she died. So that's my story, a bit of my story. And
Thank you, Claire.
thank you for listening.
Thank you for your beautiful singing as well. I'd never heard the Ladino. Stan, Notte, may I ask you to finish this part of the offerings?
Yep.
The story.
Have we got sound? Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2. Hello? Oh, you can hear me. Lovely. Okay. For some reason, I was expecting somebody to answer me.
Yeah, sorry, I was answering you, but I was muted. Sorry, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. First of all, Moze, for putting this together. Lovely evening, lovely stories. God, Anita, I felt every emotion in that story, having experienced something very similar myself. And I want to thank whoever it was that offered the prompt, the story you tell yourself. I'm not sure who that came from, but that's the one I've gone with. So, Rudyard Kipling once said, "Words are the most powerful drug known to man." I'm not sure in which context Rudyard said those words. Maybe he was referring to his writing or the many worlds available through books. It is unlikely that Rudyard was referring to a mental health scenario, though. After all, he lived from 1875 to 1936, a time when mental health awareness was, at best, in its infancy. I could, of course, be wrong, though. There is no chance, however, I am wrong when I say that Jordan Belfort, the lead character in the film The Wolf of Wall Street, was definitely not referring to a mental health scenario when he informed his sales team that the only thing standing between you and your dreams is the bullshit story you keep telling yourself. Because his sole motivation in that scene was to generate more sales and more wealth. And yet, the only thing standing between you and your dreams is this bullshit story you keep telling yourself. And words are the most powerful drug known to man. Both have powerful resonance when applied to someone dealing with mental ill health. Someone, anyone, who on a daily basis struggles for motivation, self-belief, and to see or feel any positive vibrations in the world. Someone, anyone, for who negative words are the most powerful drug. Someone who is, without knowing it, addicted to those negative words. I mean, how could anyone chase a dream of any consequence if they are handicapped by thinking patterns that mean the story they are telling themselves is they are not good enough, not talented enough, not energetic enough? How can they even get out of bed if that story and their mind is weighed like a giant lead balloon by years of negative thinking? It's impossible. And I speak from experience. Thanks to scientific studies, we now know that most human thinking is done subconsciously, and that many people dealing with mental ill health are unaware of the thought patterns driving their low mood or erratic behavior. Which begs the question, how does that happen? There are varying opinions on this. Some argue that mental health is genetically inherited, that a disposition to a mental health disease is somehow built into us at birth. Maybe that's true. I'm certainly not expert enough to dismiss the argument out of hand, but I would doubt very much that words can be passed via genetics. I am, however, certain that the words heard during childhood have an enormous impact on how our mental health, be it good or bad, plays out in adulthood. Mountains of academic research support that statement. More importantly, my own childhood and experience with depression in adulthood is a case study that I have witnessed firsthand. So what was my childhood like? Which of the most powerful drugs known to man was I exposed to during the period of our lives when our minds are at their most malleable? And what story, be it bullshit or otherwise, did I concoct and tell myself as a consequence? Like most kids, I received a lot of messages as a child, but it's the big ones that matter, the ones you heard most often. The big ones from my mother were no one is better than you, and be yourself, a message she communicated as much by the way she dressed and behaved as any word she spoke. My father, on the other hand, was emotionally unavailable, authoritarian, and like many of his generation, believed that physical punishment and fear were important factors in parenting. I won't go into the detail of the physical punishments doled out or the emotional distance my father maintained, because the impact my father had on the story I told myself can be summarized in 4 simple statements. 1, I didn't live with my father until I was 4, but was terrified of him by the time I was 6. 2, he was quick to admonish and insult. 3, I don't have a single memory of my father saying a nice thing to me. And 4, I was reminded repeatedly that I was not to be seen and that pride was a bad thing. Today, if given a choice of creating a story for myself from either my mother or father's messages, I would obviously choose my mother's. But as a child, it was my father's messages that took hold. Maybe I chose those messages because of the father-son connection. Maybe because the human brain, as a protection mechanism, is defaulted to negative messages. Maybe because there was so much trauma involved. Maybe it is all of the above. Whatever the reason, I was drugged by my father's words. And the story I told myself, especially subconsciously, was unhappy and unhealthy, to put it mildly. I know now I carried that story into my adult life, and that it was at the root of the depression I was diagnosed with in 2006. I must now make something clear. My father was not a monster. In fact, he was in many ways a very nice man, but he was a product of a family environment too. And from what little I know of that, his family environment was no picnic. His mother was a harsh, withdrawn woman. He had a brother with a violent disposition that in today's world would certainly be diagnosed as a mental health issue. He was a child during an extraordinarily repressed era of Irish history. And that's just the headlines. So what story, I often wonder, did my father create from his circumstances? And what story was his father and the many fathers before him subconsciously repeating to themselves? Are they the same as mine? Are they better? Worse? And what influence did they have on the story I created for myself in childhood and carried with me as an addiction into adulthood? The truth is, their influence on the story I created for myself must have been great. After all, their stories influenced the behaviors and messages that made up the relationships of the families that eventually led to me coming into the world. But there is another truth too. I don't need to understand or change their story to change what I am telling myself. I just need to understand and change my own story. After all, as an adult, I can choose the words I want to digest. So that is what I have been doing in one way or another for the past 12 years. I will admit I didn't realize for a very long time that I was rewriting a subconscious story, or that I was, in effect, addicted to a negative way of thinking. But I was aware that I had decided to bring more positive words into my life. I began that process with affirmations. Affirmations are defined as a positive present tense statement of intent. For a long time, I used a full A4 page of affirmations every single day. Even on days I felt terrible and getting out of bed was torture. Brushing my teeth a Herculean task. Putting on a seatbelt took every ounce of strength I possessed. I repeated messages such as I am happy, I am good, I am loved, over and over again. Often, it must be said, I felt like a complete charlatan. Other times, I was convinced I was wasting my time, but I persevered. And over the years, well, my thinking changed, or maybe softened is a better word. Nowadays, I still work with affirmations when I am swimming or walking, both of which I do regularly. But for the past 5 years, the daily practice I have worked with is gratitude. I do this at night, just before I go to sleep, by recounting the events of my day and saying thank you, usually in my mind, for all that has occurred since I arose. I include everything in that list, both good or bad. I've no idea why I include the bad, I just do. What I do know is that thank you are two of the most powerful words, or in Rudyard Kipling's phraseology, drugs known to man. Why do I say that? Because the results of these practices on my thinking and therefore behavior have been enormous. I am much better from a mental health perspective. I am more content, more positive, more connected to myself and the world. Most importantly, my subconscious story is no longer filled with self-loathing, shame and doubt. Instead, it is now much kinder to me and contains healthy quantities of self-belief. And I actually like myself now. And that's a big change. Changing the story I tell myself is the reason I am here tonight telling the story. Of that, I have no doubt. It is not that long ago, the story I was telling myself, the one that looped over and over and over, the one that told me I was not good enough, not smart enough, not anything enough to be seen, never mind heard, would not have allowed me to share my creativity or my childhood story with anyone, never mind an audience of writers. But that is the power of words, the most powerful drug known to man. They can change the story you tell yourself, and in the process, they can change your life for the better.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much, Stan, for this very.
You've silenced yourself there, Moze.
Did you hear anything of what I said?
Not a word.
Okay.
Okay, it's okay.
I was just thanking you profusely for your lucid analysis and for the story you told us, which is quite a hopeful story as well. We're going to do an open mic after this if people want to sign up for it in the chat. And I want to do a very short chat with Anita if she's still there. Anita, you still there? Anita, yes. Could you unmute yourself?
Yes. Hello.
Anita, okay. Right. Now, I just wanted to see, I mean, you're one of the few, as well as Rae, but I did an interview with Rae and Maria, but she's gone now. But I just want to ask, as a storyteller, because you are a storyteller, most of all, do you also write?
I do, yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. But as a storyteller, do you recognize yourself in what Stan just said about, does the story you tell us about your, quite a painful component of your childhood, does it transform you? Does it change you in some ways?
Yes, I identified very much with what Stan said, and I think the part that I most identified with was the struggle to actually make the story public to any audience, really, because I think although I wouldn't equate my experiences with Stan's, I think that any experience in your young and growing years that leaves you with a feeling that there is something fundamentally unacceptable about your voice, and then by extension about your existence, it does leave you struggling to find that voice again, because when you tell a story about yourself and about something that's very deeply important to yourself, you are affirming yourself, and it can take a lot of struggle in many ways if you've learned that the opposite is the way to survive. If you haven't necessarily been told that, and no, but certainly I don't think that any child who was probably struggling himself intended to teach me that. But if that's been what you've told yourself to survive, then it can take a lot of time to unlearn that. So I do identify with the difficulty of actually telling stories like this. And this was the first time I have told anything about those particular experiences, and especially about the political aspect of what happened.
Okay, did that, thank you very much. Did that, the connection between the personal and the political, did that help you tell it? Because it was, yes.
Well, I feel that the connection between the personal and the political was something that I wanted to handle very carefully, really. And I also wanted to make it clear that the story that was maybe visited upon me by others, and the story that I was absorbing, was not a true story, was not the only story. And that was why I wanted to make it clear that there were many other angles to the story, that there were many people who were very kind to me in England, and who were looking on and doing their utmost to make sure I got fair treatment. But as a teacher myself, it is difficult to go in and arbitrate between children in the playground if you want to help a child to, I suppose, open out more and open out to life more. So the people who are trying to do the right thing, didn't always understand what was going on, and they were shut out very comprehensively by me. And that yes, so I wanted to make sure that when I did tell the story, which because time always comes when the story is told, that I was telling it in a way that was as truthful as possible.
And as fair as possible.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Anita. Thank you. Okay, the open mic. Let's see. Sebastien, you were here, one of the second person here. Could you start the open mic, please? Could you unmute yourself?
Sorry, Moze.
Yeah.
I still need to find the text, so you could maybe switch to another person. If you don't mind. Sorry.
Okay. Well, let's start with Margaret O'Regan. I will wait for you. Let me know when you are ready. Margaret.
Thanks, Moze. Thank you. I'm not sure if I've read. I've two short ones. I may have read them here before, but hoping people will have forgotten them. The first one is called Passion. Stirrings begin in my mind. Passionate thoughts run wild. Sensual sensations of you. The feel of you, the scent of you, the taste of you, the heat of you. Feelings flood my senses. Every muscle tenses. Blushes bring hot-blooded flushes. Through every pore it rushes. Red-hot desire quickens. Exciting turn-on visions. Pleasure zones exude erotically charged fluids. And all this before you walk in the door. Now I have another short one.
Thank you,
it's called Escapism, and I wrote it during a time when I was cocooning in either March or April. And it was inspired by a total stranger that used to walk past my front garden every morning with the newspaper back from the shop. And I kind of spent my life that time out in the front garden, saying hello to people as they passed by and having conversations with strangers. This particular fellow I didn't have a conversation with. Escapism. As I sit on the lawn, I see your sinuous form, sashaying, hips swaying while you stroll my way. I know you don't know me, but a tale I have woven has me plucking your form to inhabit my dream dorm, to capture your essence and have your indoor presence, to unveil and reveal your erotic appeal. Your rippling muscles cause my knees to buckle as my eyes explore, sexualizing for more. Your dexterous hands play havoc with my glands, releasing hormonal flushes, emitting rapid-fire gushes. I wonder if you sense, as you passed by my fence, what fantasies you've emboldened, what scenarios you've enfolded.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Tantalizing visions. Let's see. Padraig, would you like to continue with the open mic?
Yes, okay, sure. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. As often you know that I've been writing this novel, and I'm writing it, all the characters in the first person, and it's a novel that's in 3 parts about the Great Famine, the Ungortamor, the Great Migration to America, and the American Civil War. And I'm going to read a short piece. It's in connection with a character called Padraig, who is a 50-year-old man who's been evicted, and his daughter, Mary, has sailed on a ship to America, and he returns to his own village because he understands there's some relief works in the village of Glenville, actually, just north of Cork, where there's to this day, if anybody wants to see it, a very beautiful famine road, which of course was created with great hardship. And this is a small section of Cormac's experience when he's working on the famine road. His heart comes alive again. Today, though, a woman catches my eye. I can't explain why. There's something about her that captures my imagination. Her quiet dignity. I see deep suffering etched in her face, yet she carries herself with immense grace as she goes about her work. Twice this morning, she arrives at my side to fill her basket, and I'm taken by surprise, both times. I've not had stirrings like this for decades. The second time she picks up the stones I have broken and places them in her basket, I look into her eyes, azure blue, startling, with a depth of soul that seizes my breath. I'm shaken for 10 minutes afterwards, cannot account for what is happening to me. I watch her often during the remainder of the week. She is largely unaware of me and anyone else and seems to work as if in a dream. At the end of each day, I notice she moves away from the site in a different direction to everyone else. She crosses the river at the stepping stones and seems to be heading towards Doon Peter Well. She looks broken as I watch her cross the meadow on the other side of the river. Mystery surrounds her. Part of me wants to follow her and find out more about her, but I know that would be an encroachment. She deserves her privacy, so I exercise restraint. I turn away and move to my own place of refuge. On Saturday, she doesn't turn up at the relief works. I am disturbed by her absence. Without drawing too much attention, I discover her name is Eileen. Surprisingly, a number of people know her. The women whisper silently of her tragedy. Her husband dying of fever in 45 and leaving her with a son and daughter, I overhear one of the women. Another takes up the refrain. Both of them died a couple of months ago when fever swept over the township of Ballyhooly. I hear local people say that they were her life and soul. She bore them late in her 30s after a long wait. It being Saturday, Jones calls it a day early at 4 o'clock. Eager, I imagine he is, to head off to some shebeen or other. I head for the stepping stones. My thought is to head for Doon Peter. I climb up the hill slowly. When I reach the surrounding walls of the cemetery, the atmosphere changes. I clamber through a gap in the ditch. Spread over the graveyard are small rocks driven into the ground, a poignant reminder of grief and loss. Then I see her, lying in the ground by two small rocks driven into the grassy soil, on the other side of the graveyard. My first thought that I am too late. She's gone from this world. When I reach her, I find her weak, but breathing. I press my hand to her forehead and am relieved that she has no temperature. She is barely conscious. I'm going to carry you, Mastor, I whisper into her ear. Be patient with me, to where it is warm and dry, where you will be safe. Trust me. I lift her gently on my back. She is as light as a feather, and as kindly and tenderly as I can manage, I bear her down the hill, taking my time, humming a lullaby as I walk. I clamber gingerly over the stepping stones until I reach the scalpeen. She is conscious now as I prop her carefully on the straw bed, her back resting against the rock. I set to, busy with the firewood and turf I've scavenged from the bog. Soon I make a simple soup with as much nourishment as I think she can handle. Surprisingly, she responds well and eats enthusiastically. When she is finished, I lay her on the straw bed. I feed the fire during the evening, bring a temperature to the scalpeen that has not been there before. I need to get the chill out of her bones. I cannot take my eyes from her. She is so beautiful, resting there. When it is time for me to sleep, I am embarrassed. At first, I think I should try and sleep sitting by the makeshift door, my back against the structure. But as the night gets colder, I know our bodies will be warmer together. Forgive me, Mastor, but I think I should hold you. As I lie beside her, I feel her melt into my arms. Surprisingly, there is an ease, almost a recognition between us. Within minutes, we are both sound asleep. When dawn breaks, I wake, rise, and feed the fire. She sleeps on, and I am glad. As it's Sunday, I have the day to take care of her. I make some more soup, and when she wakes, I take it to her. She receives it gratefully. There is a serenity in her mien. It's as if we have been together for some time. After she has eaten, she lies again and sleeps soundly for the remainder of the day. At 4 in the afternoon, she wakes with a start, with a look of terror in her face. What's the matter, Mastor? I whisper. I must get to my children, for I have abandoned them, she says, and rises immediately and moves towards the door. I know I cannot do anything to stop her and follow behind as she makes her way to the stepping stones. I let her know I am coming with her to make sure she is going to be all right. She is preoccupied in thought and seems not to hear me. Within 10 minutes, we are in Dún Peter, and she makes her way to what I know now is our children's grave. I watch her for a while, and then she speaks to me. It breaks my heart to be apart from them. There are times when I want to rip up the soil between me and them, to hold them in my arms just one more time. It is all I can do to stop myself. I'm afraid wild animals and dogs will dig them up. This stuns me. I can see her pain and I'm powerless to ease it. After some time, I whisper to her softly, it's important you stay well then, Mastor, so you can protect them. You will not survive out here in the cold. You need to stay warm and be able to sleep. I watch her to see if what I am saying is reaching beyond her debilitating grief. Then I think she is ready. When I think she is ready to hear more, I say, tonight I will cover their grave with rocks. Would you let me do that? I wait for her to absorb what I am saying. Eventually she looks up at me with those beautiful yet sad, doleful eyes and nods to me in approval. I have won her confidence. As she watches and sensitive to her movement, I begin to gather rocks from the field beyond, large granite pieces. These I place reverently, thoughtfully, and solemnly on their graves. The act itself bringing to me a deep sense of her loss and a commitment forming within me that I want to bear it with her, to somehow, if I can, nurse her through this crucible of pain. When I finish, I look over towards her and say, Eileen, you can come here every day as a vigil. I can take care of the work. I would like to take care of you. And next Sunday, when I have time again, I will move the Sculpine up here, up the hill, next to the graveyard. After a few moments, she looks up at me. Tears are brimming in her eyes. You would do that for me, Padraig? Willingly and more, I move towards her and place my arms around her. She slumps towards me and begins to sob, her body heaving with the effort. After some time, she begins to ease. The evening is drawing in and it's getting cold. Eileen, we need to go back to the Sculpine now. We need to eat and sleep. You can return in the morning. I wait with bated breath, hoping against hope that she will have the courage to leave. After some time, she rises slowly and moves towards the graves, now covered with a mound of dark gray granite rocks. She bends to kiss the stones, turns, reaches out for my hand, and together we make our way down the hill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Padraig, for this very moving installment.
Moze, you're muted again. Oh,
Yeah, I don't know how it happens, but thank you very much, Padraig, for your this very moving installment of your novel. I might have said it again. I am looking for Sebastien. Are
Yeah.
you ready
I
for us?
found.
You're ready.
Yeah, I found what I wanted to read. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to read. I'm into haiku at the moment, and I think for a long time. So I'm writing a haiku, very short Japanese poems, and I have 5 to read here. So I'll read them twice because they are so short, and you have to kind of go into the mood quite quickly. So I'll read them twice each. So the first one. Late summer, other kids run through that same rapeseed field. Late summer, other kids run through that same rapeseed field. Last turn of the key, already missing the tall ash trees rustle. Last turn of the key, already missing the tall ash trees rustle. Chorizo on the pan, all those years far from home. Chorizo on the pan, all those years far from home. Snail under the sun, the little boy with his leaf, an umbrella. Snail under the sun, the little boy with his leaf, an umbrella. And the last one. With my daughter at the spice market, I am 6 years old. With my daughter at the spice market, I am 6 years old. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Seb. Oh, yes, I am on mute. Thank you. Is there anyone else for the open mic? Max, are you waiting for the open mic, or Mx Creedonomshea? Oh. Yes, she's there. Max, did you want to do something for the open mic?
Thanks, Moze. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah. Did you want to do something for the open mic?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated. Beautiful readings from everybody. I kind of didn't know what to do, but I'll respond just to what I heard a little bit. I feel it just makes you consider we're just a speck in the spectrum of what came before and after us. And I suppose I'll just run together a few thoughts, if that's okay. And I suppose I'll start with just a little writing challenge that Margaret, myself, and with Sue Blue and a writing group. We've got some fantastic writing prompts, revolution, invisibility, gaps. So last night was gaps, so it became the gap years in my life. So it just rolls me into a little song about my family heritage. I was number 14, steeped in my family's history from my father. My dad was Creedon and his mother was Cotter. They're very old names in Inchigeela, going way back sometimes to the Cotter family. And his people, his dad went to America to mine for copper in Butte, Montana. And, the original Creedons came down, and I've often said it at DeBarra's, and they settled around Balivorna. And even Sean O'Regan's mother, as a friend of mine told me, is actually a Creedon lady as well. So the family were associated with harp, being musicians and harpists, especially. I went to Ballymaloo there the other day and saw the Creedon harp there. The name is carved on it. There was 5 Creedon harpists. So I'll just do a short little thing. So if I can just find that there, just the way that I'm after holding up now. I didn't think you'd come on so fast. Apologies. Yeah, it was just gaps. So it was a stream of consciousness to get it ready for an hour's time. Gap years. A gap in teeth where the air hisses in, kisses of urgent ventilation. And do you see Parpet Donna or Vanessa Paradis? Oh no, it's just a comic kid cartoon. A gap in tracks where the journey derails with one chink, it rocks the whole locomotion. A stubborn nag on the gap of Dunlow, a gap in a field where the colt has bolted, and there was gaps in the discs where the gel poured out and kept me in my profession, stretching and twisting and strengthening framework, surgical cures, the gap of fenestration. A gap in my age when I was a whole generation, a gap in my communication. With that television talk and that tie-dye t-shirt, sure what's going on in her head, John? A gap in school year when you go on the tear. For the Yanks, it's a spring break vacation and they wear a gap on their shoulders and hips for their Banana Republic and their old battered Navy. There's a gap in my heart where once you have been, a gap in the make and break circuit training, a gap that you leave for me to breathe now, but I still miss that electrification. A gap in the shape of my ECG, a change in my beat and my rhythm. It's for the best to take a gap for future years, but and find that toothy smile again. A gap in my song where once it was played, harmonizing in duets. A gap in the strings that laced through my chords, now a solo once again. A gap in a mother's heart for her flown children, a place at the table each day. A gap for exclusive mother and son. Sure, you have a whole new love assignation. So that was my response to gaps, but isn't it great to get a prompt because you wouldn't think about it. So I just sing a little song then about my family genetic thing of feeling that you remember your forebears always. And I feel I'll stick in a little bit at the end about Nick's fossil a little bit. Can you hear that? As we stand encircled by the stones, we roll back millennia. And I once knew you then, but you don't know me now. As we brace ourselves in icy wind, my camouflage hides me within. And I see ghosts in your eyes, but you don't know me now. Once I was your liege, my chieftain lord. Our clans united then beneath your sword, and I play the harp at your court in the Earl's time. I see your colors in the mist, your hue is of the silver birch, with hair this ether hour is of the willow flower, and you bend in windsong like the reed, in the music of my native seed, the harpist and the chief, but you don't know me now. You ask why I don't paint your native place. It's because our roots entwine this native place, this ancient place, and emerging through our line is traced to the Earl's time, to the Earl's time. Just for Nick Blasphemous. In vino in tempo plastico, we are sailing in our oceans in our tiny boats, and each crest sprays its foam upon our highs and lows. And the air seas cling to the earth, and on we go. And lakes become dry wells, and they tell us that the seas will soon begin to swell, and we're revolving in the spirals of our own seashell, navigating secret oceans within ourselves. Can you hear me? Each day and night the earth spins on itself, horizons disappear behind a darkened shelf. Spinning seasons, we revolve around the sun and start to melt, and we rebuild, and then again we start to build, spin again ourselves. I think I leave it at that, because there's a long song on that. Thank you, Nick, for the lovely fossils. It moved me.
Thank you, Max, for the lovely singing. It also moved me.
I miss you. I miss your saxophone, Moze. But thanks, everybody.
I think that was us for apart from some mentions. Thank you everyone who took part and everyone who took part in the open mic, musically and in terms of storytelling. Again, the Cape Clear Storytelling Festival is on this weekend, and there's also the Kerry Writers Museum, www.kerrywritersmuseum.com, with Maria Gillen, who will be featured teller there on the 19th and 20th of September. You have to book for the Cape Clear Storytelling to actually take part in it. We will be having a specific storytelling session published on the 18th of September, which is Irish Culture Night, and it's an international session about the theme of how nature nourishes us, but I will send around an email. And our next official DeBarra spoken word session is on the 7th of October, Wednesday the 7th of October. It is, and that's why I say that Sebastien is inspiring, it's going to be haiku night. And Anton Floyd, who is a haiku master, will be haikuing away. He will be our guest, and I hope to get some haiku secrets out of it. So maybe everyone who turns up can do a little haiku if they want to, as a special challenge. And I'm hoping for lots of haiku fans, because it's quite a thing, I think. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to close this session. Thank you,
Moze. Well done.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you, Nick. Lovely job on your story.
Thank you. You too, Max. Thank you.
Yeah, great one of you. Really loved it. I've been sketching it. Somewhere. I didn't get you all, but I was too busy listening now. I didn't want to be not missing any of it, so I didn't sketch it.
If you want to post anything, we can put them on.
They're kind of crap, but they're small little souvenir. I always say they're little souvenir, but they're much good. Little line drawings. If you weren't so good, they'd have been good drawings. You were too good. Thanks a million.
You've been saying that line drawings for way too long, Mike. You need to
half of them
change the story you're telling yourself, my love.
I will, and I will be inspired by your story. It resonates with me, Stan, very deeply. Well done.
We love your art. We always do. You know that.
I love to beat myself up, but I'm getting better not doing it. Okay,
call over here and I'll take a baseball bat to you.
You do. You call me to order, Stan, regularly. Sure, we're all supporting today. That's what it's all about.
Lovely stuff.
Okay.
We want to do a jig now before we go. I could do the jig now because I'd like a bit of dance.
A jig on
only slagging. I'm only slagging.
Okay. Thank you and good night.
Salam.
Good night.
Thank you.
Hello,
everyone.
Okay.